Hi, this is Dr. Randy Bach. Today is June 29, 2022, and I'm here for a coronavirus conversation as every week. And hopefully, we're going to be able to mutate, much as the variant strains have done in coronavirus, into a new version of this conversation, keeping it a viral conversation, but maybe bringing up other more general medical topics. Just a few off the top of my head. For instance, I'm working at a clinic that has a new treatment for men's erectile dysfunction, and there's some interesting studies about that. People always are curious about getting off the COVID-19 20 pounds or so that they put on. We can talk about diet, obesity, general topics, anything that comes to mind. One that's they can sometimes be a little bit off topic as well. I've always been puzzled why Viagra was written for men, but can never be written for women. I understand that men and women approach sexuality differently, and they have, somewhat different, hydraulic system going, but in some ways not. They come from embryologically, the clitoris and the penis come from the same basic tissue, and there's spongy tissue, and there's, an erection within the clitoris as well. I don't want to get too far off topic, but, there are a lot of fascinating things out there. And if you show an interest or have some questions, I can maybe start, partitioning this, weekly talk into other topics and areas such as, we might want to talk about. I'm not going to be able to be treating patients, through this portal. It's a one-way thing, first of all. Second of all, I'm just going to be talking about, topics medically, generally speaking. Anyway, what's in the news? June, tends to be pretty quiet on the news front. A lot of people are going away. Vacation homes, especially our elites. Notably, as you probably know by now, Dr. Fauci quadruply injected with vaccine juice, came down with COVID-22. He probably still calls it COVID-19. It's not. It's COVID-22, 2022. And this shows the utter ineffectiveness of the vaccines for the current strains. I think that all things considered, if I had to face a virus naive, that is without any possibility of vaccination in advance, I would probably pick coronavirus in either its forms as 2003 SARS or COVID-19 over, say, the Spanish flu, which is far more dangerous and virulent back in the day, 100 years ago or so, when there was no vaccine. They didn't even know what viruses were. That's tended to be a killer much more of young people than old, and there was some innate immunity most likely amongst the older population because the influenza viruses cycle more. Insofar as COVID-19 was dangerous, it was dangerous the way a wolf is when it encounters a population. We could go back to our ancestors. The first time they saw wolves, they were feared because wolves had their own kind of home base. They had their own essentially animal reservoir. They didn't need humans. But as wolves turned into our domestic dogs, they did need us. So our current Shih Tzus and Dachshunds and retrievers, and I don't know, there's probably a few hundred different brand names for dogs, poodles and so whatnot. They have self-attenuated to be much more mild towards us because they need us, and they don't want to kill us because we feed them and they help protect and nurture our souls and all that kind of stuff. They give us a lot of laughs. That's not the case with wolves, foxes, coyotes, which still present a danger. So original SARS 2003 likely had an animal base and came upon the human population without any, investment, as it were, in our safety and well-being. But was kind of frozen in time and frozen in the lab, and probably had a little bit of tweaking, gain of function testing and whatnot, which unfortunately our institutes of health funded via Dr. Fauci, which he admitted with the Rand Paul investigation. Anyway, over time, when it was re-released into the wild, probably inadvertently, I don't think China was directly intending to release this. Nonetheless, when it was released into the wild, it had the same impact it had and the power of a punch that the 2003 SARS virus had. And we didn't hear that much about it because China was a different China back then. There was not, as much penetration through social media and whatnot. Not that it's, still it's a pretty opaque place and hard to figure out completely externally, but it was even more so difficult to discern and inscrutable back in 2003, and there was far less air travel from China, and they were less well off. I think they did a lot of draconian measures, which we won't really have a chance to get into, nor can we really discover at this juncture. Anyway, once the original ancestral version was out of the bag, it started to mutate, and then it went through all the Greek letters and wound up with a few skippings of letters. To avoid XI, to embarrass the Chinese premier, Xi, which I think the Greeks pronounce Chi. At any rate, we wound up with Omicron, and now we have variant strains of Omicron, which have self-attenuated to more of the poodle phase, or the dachshund, or whatever, or maybe a pit bull on occasion for certain individuals. Nonetheless, mostly tame. And it's not to say you can't have a problem with your dog. You can't potentially get rabies or trip over the leash, or have somebody else's dog bite you and whatnot. There are some dangers with dogs, but it's nothing like having a wolf or coyote in your house and whatnot, one who is untamed. So this is kind of the natural evolution of the virus, as probably is the case with all our cold viruses. And I always remind people that 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6 of our cold viruses before COVID-19 were coronaviruses. So it's this category that remains very common within the common cold category, and it's common. So there's adenovirus, RSV, rhinoviruses, and whatnot, but I'm not going to get into them all. But the fact of the matter is that coronavirus in itself is nothing really novel. It's more that this was the wolf variety that had not accommodated to people, and vice versa. And now we have. So where does that leave us? Well, I'm trying to be brisk tonight. So that was a little bit of an intro. And I guess, just to kind of reiterate the point, insofar as the COVID-19 vaccine is a positive, it was so for COVID-19. So for the ancestral version, which was passing around the world in 2020. So if you could have gotten a vaccine prior to that or as early as possible, fine. But as each variant strain moves on, the COVID-19 vaccine covers, has less in common with those, and it is not a booster. It's nothing of the sort. It's a total misnomer. It's not really a vaccine for Omicron, as we can see from Dr. Fauci and many others who are coming down with Omicron, with really usually little consequence. I mean, he's in his 80s, and I assume he's going to survive, and I wish him well on a physical, personal basis. But professionally, he's been out of bounds because he's helped prop up fear and a lot of the lockdown issues, which have brought their own costs to society, and societies plural. So I'm going to go into a little bit of that, I hope. So I have a couple articles I'd like to share with you, and let's see if I can get them up here. So here's one that's relatively recent, June 22, 2022, how COVID has deepened inequality in 6 stark graphics. So this is a nice kind of interactive piece from Nature, and I'll just kind of go through it. It actually comes up with some little quickie blurbs. Basically, people were getting less impoverished through the years. This is 2015 over here, 2022 is over here, and so the numbers would have projected down further. But in fact, more people became impoverished with the onset of lockdowns and diminished travel, diminished trade, and so forth. So you can read their, the blurbs right here. So I'm not going to do much talking over this. And this, let's see, 500 million of these people could be in sub-Saharan Africa, a very poor place to begin with. And that shows that, a lot of the places where people are poor got worse. In East Asia, it wasn't quite as bad because I think there's greater wealth there in general, depending on the country. So as we kind of slide through, you can pause and read these if you like. And as we've seen here, food prices have gone up. Increasing prices create a very difficult and tense cycle. This here shows estimated income loss as a percentage basis, and it goes, I think, through the quartiles of poverty. So the poor people got even more poorer on a percentage basis. That's redundant. So they suffered more, is what I would say. And the wealthier people didn't have much diminishment. They may not have increased as much, but they didn't have as much diminishment as the poor people. So in the bottom 20% of earners, I guess these are quintiles, were 7% lower than projected before the pandemic. And these, similar for the next bunch, but as the income level goes up, there's a little bit of less being affected. And so the numbers come up and finally they turn blue. That's the wealthiest cohort. So as we've seen, our elites tend to be a little bit tone deaf for all the things they do. They want to keep as safe as possible and keep everything going. And, but they have their Cape houses and they have their mountain retreats, and they are able to go away and, kind of stay at the, the family home in the woods someplace and keep away and yet do all their work, online. This is not really the nature of say the people, who are more on the front lines. And in the United States, the age-adjusted number of COVID deaths per 100,000 people, that is, so the rate was higher in those groups that tend to be on the poorer end of the spectrum. Now, that doesn't necessarily say it's, here, I think we have had some exaggeration of actual COVID-19 deaths, but I'm going to leave that aside for now. In England, the COVID-19 death rate in the most deprived areas was double that in the most affluent. So this is deaths across the board. So people had not just COVID-19 problems, but they avoided, being treated for other issues, and they're a little bit more disconnected, and they need our help and our concern more, and they didn't get it. So we sacrificed, for the sake of keeping a few people alive, mostly the elderly alive, potentially a few more months, we sacrificed a lot of other quality adjusted life years, they're called QALY, and things of that sort. This is the same type of thing showing Brazil, and I'm just going to let you read the caption or pause or whatever to go over this, because it gets a little bit in the weeds. And there's been more domestic violence as well. So this is, here's the article, as you might see it in Nature magazine, and you can go over this on your own. I'm happy to put the link up if you're interested. This is I come back to these pictures now and then. This is kind of the waves of different COVID over time with the variants, and the variant strains we're on right now is these are all, I guess, from purple on is all the these are all the Omicron strains. The United States here, and these last three over time have been Omicron strains. So it's been a long time since, I guess, the Alpha. So this is even predating the ancestral version. Is all before all this. It's over on the left side. You wouldn't even see it. This is country by country. Everyone's doing the same thing. We're all getting basically same strains. If you see the color pattern, it goes. I'm not going to name all the colors, but it's basically the same set of colors from country to country to country to country. And so we're all pretty much in the same boat as far as this goes. And Omicron has no relationship to COVID-19 as far as being covered by the COVID-19 vaccine, which is, again, misnamed as booster. I'd like to go over the countries. I'm just going to do this really quick. India doesn't really have any cases anymore. Indonesia, ditto, and their deaths have gone down. These are places that predominantly were not vaccinated during the various strains, including the Greek letter strains. I'll maybe skip over. South Africa had a little bit more blips and whatnot, but it's still a very low vaccinated place, and they're not really having any deaths now either. Sweden, pretty much handled this with letting people mill around, and throughout they had far fewer cases per capita than the United States did, and they have they've gone tracked down to fewer deaths than they pretty much did in the norm of Europe. They were a little bit ill-served by some of the WHO facts, as it were. And I think I might have a page on this as we move along. I'll see about that. Anyway, what's interesting is the United States, tends to have numbers inflated. If you compare the United States to England, and they're similar population, similar ethnic groupings by color and whatnot. The UK has lower relative deaths in the later phases than we have in the United States. And I kind of think this has to do with overdiagnosing COVID-19, because we have a financial incentive to every hospital and to patients as well by eliminating the deductible if they have a COVID-19 diagnosis while in hospital. And we're testing everybody in the hospital. I think you're just going to get a lot of false cohort with this. So just kind of to move things along, these things I've been looking at. This is somebody noting this article here, that there was a use of fear to control behavior in the COVID-19 crisis. And scientists admit this in the UK. One scientist said the government was very worried about compliance, and they thought people wouldn't want to be locked down. Well, yeah, duh. And so they express the scientific members of the Scientific Pandemic Influenza Group on Behavior express regret about unethical methods. So they basically lied. And the group warned in March last year that the ministers need to increase the perceived level of personal threat from COVID-19 because, quote, a substantial number of people still do not feel sufficiently personally threatened. So this is your government. This is your government tax dollars at work. And this is the way they wanted to do things. And they funneled everybody into vaccines when, treatment was potentially equally, useful, especially, since the COVID-19 vaccine has not done anything since the ancestral version in the way of treatment, a little bit, with the earlier versions, alpha and beta, but not so much later on. So here's, I guess, the thing I was referencing earlier, the COVID-19 death tolls. Scientists acknowledge errors in the WHO estimates. This is not quite the same thing as the last one, but there's a lot of fudging. People kind of, I think they squeezed the toothpaste however they wanted, and they made patterns and shapes that they wanted to see for the purposes they wanted to. And this has had its own price. Again, in Nature magazine, the pandemic's true health cost, how much of our lives has COVID stolen? I think this one's actually more talking about disability and death from COVID-19. So I might be somewhat on the wrong topic here. But there's been a lot of morbidity and mortality ancillary to the things we've done to treat COVID-19. There's an article here I can give reference to. It's too long to go over, but a doctor's perspective in COVID-19 in Australia, and the way they really went overboard to lock people down and so forth. And they basically had increased deaths from all causes as a result of what they were doing to kind of, they basically were smashing a mosquito with a hammer, and the hammer damaged a lot of other things. So just kind of grazing a little bit still. And I apologize if this is too quick. But Naomi Wolf, who's not a physician, I guess she writes doctor here, but I think she's a PhD, and she's historically of the left, but she's had these episodes of coming to her senses. And dear friend, sorry to announce a genocide. I think it's a reasonable article to read. This is from May, and basically. Encouraging vaccines for babies, and this is ongoing. And the fact of the matter is, the vaccine is completely outdated. It's obsolete. I think there's an article here by Jessica Rose. Maybe it's a little further on. She got a Jessica Substack. Moderna safety document. Quick, make one so we can pretend that we need to inject babies with obsolete injectables. I don't think I could have said it better, and pretend that it won't injure them, except for 1 in 200. So 1 in 200 doesn't sound like a lot, but if 0 out of 100 are at risk from COVID 2022, and frankly from COVID-19 as well, then why do this at all? And mind you, it's completely outdated and, as she says, obsolete vaccine. This is an idiocy. That you follow the money. There's a certain amount of money, from government going into pharma through COVID-19, and obviously there's going to be a lot going from pharma back into government officials for their reelection and so forth as thank you tips. All of a sudden, speaking of Pfizer, for a long time we couldn't think about any type of actual treatment for COVID-19, but now we can because Pfizer's coming up with one. And it's Paxlovid. I have not seen the full data on this, but the way in which people fought tooth and nail to call ivermectin, I don't know what horse antibiotic or something like that, and insult HCQ is I forget what, and whether those, again, I'm not invested in whether those worked or not, but they get in the absence of any other treatment, they were quashed and killed, and so we're just supposed to sit patiently locked up, as ostriches or whatever, with our heads in the sand, waiting until this miraculous vaccine came along. And again, I do think it was miraculous with the timing and so forth, and treatment for the early phases. But to keep using this has been really criminal. I think it falls in the category of propaganda. A friend of mine, where did he write here? Let's see. This is the same article before. Anyway, one of my blog friends, points out that this. Oh, here we go. Injecting 6-month-olds to 5-year-olds. No, murder has no statute of limitations. So the EUA, the Emergency Use Act, implies an emergency. There is no emergency for toddlers. And what he calls a C19 faux vaccine. Again, I think it's a real vaccine, but it's for COVID-19, which is 2019, 2020, and this is years later. So, you got to keep up with the times. What else? There's just a lot of other stuff that went along with this. I can give you links to some of these. I'm not going to be able to spend a lot of time on them tonight. But the Brownstone Institute is a good place to look at a lot of these articles. I also check Steve Kirsch, and he has a Substack, stevekirsch.substack. I think it's separately interesting to me that a lot of the best analyses have not come from the medical or science professionals themselves. Last week I was speaking with Edward Dowd, who is not a medical professional. I recommend you look at the interview there. He was fabulous and informative and so forth, and brave. And Steve Kirsch I have not met him nor spoken with him, but he points out, he's just a computer guy, software, I believe, and he points out that what you see and hear from the regular mainstream press is not necessarily true. He points out the New York Times had this to say, that ivermectin has little effect on recovery time from COVID, but they're maybe just looking at one piece, and there's a lot of other data. If you look at death results, ivermectin alone is 3 times better preventing death than any vaccine. So if you're a vaccine enthusiast, ivermectin may not work, but neither do vaccines. And insofar as they marginally work, ivermectin might marginally work better than a vaccine. It stands to reason because ivermectin is an antibiotic and has antiviral capabilities. I think the inventors actually won the Nobel Prize, we've mentioned before, for medicine. And insofar as it works against viruses or the anti-lysosomal properties kind of across the board, it would stand to reason it would be more adaptive to the various mutant strains as they come along than a COVID-19 vaccine, which is specifically for that ancestral version spike protein appearance, one aspect, kind of a physical basis rather than dealing with functional. Anyway, I hope I didn't lose you there. Let's see, what else do we have? Same thing, pandemic's unequal toll. I think we kind of covered a lot of these. So I'm going to zip out of the screen here and maybe just give a few closing statements if I can. And there was an interesting. Maybe I can pull it up as well. It's a little bit. I think it's from 2003 as well. Um, let's see if I can find the right screen to find here. Let's see, window. Um, I don't think I can just pull it up. Well, maybe it's over here. Yeah. So it's this article here. Zip, 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 zip. So it's long. It's got a difficult title, genetic determinism as a failing paradigm in biology and medicine, implications for health and wellness. Just from the Journal of Social Work Education, 2003. So it's not a thing I generally read. So I was referred to this by a PhD population geneticist whom I admire. And he has a lot of insights from this, and maybe I'll make a separate article, a separate show about this, or invite him on if he's willing to come on. But at his point that he gained, well, a few different points he gained from this, or gleaned from this, is that something like, how did he phrase it? There's something like 2% of our disease load in the economically advanced countries of the post-industrial world are genetic. Are genetic. Most diseases from which we die are like cancer and cardiovascular disease. Those account for 70% of the premature morbidity and mortality. They're not strictly genetic in the Mendelian sense. That is, it can't be pinned down to one gene. It's multifactorial, lots of different things going on. You live your life in full, and it's not something as easy to parse out as dwarfism or albinoism or sickle cell anemia, which are strictly genetic, or even other things that are genetic related, like familial hypercholesterolemia or familial polyps and that kind of stuff. So those are very rare things, but I think, I forget the exact number, but nonetheless, I think most all of our financial science budget is towards genetics. And my friend includes the fact that viral illnesses, in a sense, are genetic. They're little bits of genes, and we see them kind of in this, no pun intended, molecular view. And we kind of lose the forest for the trees as far as our treatment goes. And I think, what I got from this was, I think I could probably stand corrected, and I'm sure he would correct me, is that, a lot of times the things that we notice wrong about our medicine and about our science, and this includes, recently with COVID-19, the way that masks have, the scientists and the doctors wanted masks and whatnot. These have had huge social implications. The lockdowns have had huge social and financial implications. We are far worse off for having listened, particularly and across the board, to people who have a very fine, particular, single kind of genome focus on their research and whatnot. So yes, they might be right that a mask might cut down your transmission by 5% or something like that, if at all, mind you. The Denmark study, the Dan Mask study from Denmark, showed there was really no differential in health outcomes from wearing a mask or not. But such as it is, if you follow these along, you'll maybe have 1% fewer viral cases, but you'll ruin the economy. You'll make everybody far worse off, and so forth. So I have found that a lot of the guiding lights are from outside of medicine and science. And this is maybe good, maybe bad, maybe expected, but I think it's very reasonable to not just look at our medical experts, the white coats. I think, Mr. Trump made essentially a fatal error, not fatal for him, he's still around and alive, but a professionally fatal error, and perhaps a nationally fatal error by overinvesting his white coat advisors with authority. They were able to, so parable of 7 blind men and the elephant. Each blind man comes away with a different impression of the elephant, because one's been feeling the ear and thinks elephants are flat and like a rug, and another one feels the tusks, thinks that elephants are all pointed. So when you just have the kind of the one expert looking at one facet of a bigger problem, you lose sight of the whole elephant. And so an elephant is not just a tree trunk. It's not just a point of a spear. And so I've found a lot of benefit from, looking at, economists and computer scientists and other kinds of people who have been able to provide their own kind of expertise from not being so much invested or so deeply in the soup of having to come up with statistics. And I think that take home messages that statistics have the same root word as the state, and this is I learned this via Michael Knowles, and you have to I forget who said it. There's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. I think it might have been Mark Twain, maybe, I don't know. So pay attention, try to do the things that are right, try to keep a moral sense about you, and let me know what else you might have thoughts about, in particular some of the things I mentioned early on in the broadcast. Anyway, have a good evening and a great summer. This is the best time of year, at least for us. Maybe you're in the Southern Hemisphere, not so much. I was on a Zoom call with some people from various places, and some were south of the equator. And it was 10:30 here, and it was, I guess, 5:30 p.m. in South Africa, and the room had gone dark. And I always thought that this time of year it's light for everybody, but it's wintertime there. So wherever you are, remember there's someplace else. Anyway, deep knowledge. So have a good evening. If you like this, let me know. Share it if you feel motivated. And as a last shameless plug, I guess I'll mention my book, Overturning Zika. It's out. You can buy it. It's on Amazon, and it's awesome. I'm hoping to get a little bit of PR, but anything that you can do to help spread the message, I certainly appreciate that. If you go to Amazon, just put in Overturning Zika, and you can learn about it. I have an article in the American Journal of Medicine as well. Just type my name, put Zika up, American Journal of Medicine. You should be able to find it. So I appreciate any comments, criticism. If you leave reviews of the book, hopefully they're good reviews.